The clock on the wall showed 6:47 p.m. and Lisa's feet were already screaming at her. She'd been on them since noon, rushing between tables at Antonio's family restaurant, carrying plates of pasta and refilling glasses of water. Her shift wasn't supposed to end until midnight and she still had 5 hours to go. "Table 7 needs more bread," Tony called from behind the counter. He was the owner, a good man who paid fair wages and never rushed his staff. Lisa grabbed a basket of warm garlic bread and headed to the corner booth where a family of 5 sat. As she walked, her fingers moved slightly at her sides. Anyone watching closely might have thought she was typing on an invisible keyboard. In a way she was. The movements were automatic now, something she'd done since she was 13 years old. Her hands remembered things her life no longer had room for. Lisa was 28, but sometimes she felt much older. 6 months ago, she'd started working double shifts, picking up every extra hour she could get. The money wasn't for anything exciting. No vacation plans or new car. She was saving to fix her electric piano, the one that sat in her tiny apartment with a broken pedal and keys that sometimes didn't make sound. Most people wouldn't understand why that mattered so much. It was just a cheap keyboard, the kind you could buy at any electronics store. But to Lisa, it was everything. It was the last connection to a life she used to imagine for herself, back when things were different. She'd grown up playing piano. Real pianos, the kind made of wood with keys that had weight to them. Her childhood home had an upright piano in the living room, and she'd spend hours there every day after school. Her parents had saved for years to buy it. Her mother used to say that Lisa's playing was the most beautiful sound in the world. By the time she was 15, Lisa was winning competitions. Her teacher said she had something special, not just skill but feeling. She could make people cry with the way she played Chopin. She could make them smile with a piece by Mozart. There was talk of scholarships, of music school, of a real future doing what she loved. Then everything changed. Her father had an accident at the construction site where he worked. One moment he was fine, the next he was in the hospital with injuries that would take months to heal. The medical bills started coming and they didn't stop. Even with insurance, the costs were overwhelming. Lisa's parents tried to hide it from her, but she wasn't stupid. She saw her mother crying over the kitchen table late at night, surrounded by papers with red stamps that said overdue. She heard the phone calls from bill collectors. She knew what it meant when her father came home from yet another doctor's appointment looking defeated. The piano was sold first. Lisa came home from school one day and it was just gone, an empty space in the living room where music used to live. Her mother hugged her and apologized, but what could Lisa say? They needed the money. A piano was a luxury they couldn't afford anymore. College became impossible. The scholarship she'd been working toward required attendance at expensive summer programs she could no longer afford. Without those programs, she couldn't compete at the level needed. One by one, her dreams got smaller until they fit inside a cramped studio apartment and a keyboard that cost $200. "Lisa, you're doing that thing again," Tony said, smiling as she returned to the counter. He meant the finger movements, the air piano playing she couldn't seem to stop. It embarrassed her sometimes, but Tony never made fun of her for it. He was one of the few people who knew about her past, about the music. "Sorry," she said, tucking her hands into her apron pockets. "Don't be sorry. It's nice. Means you're thinking about something beautiful while you're stuck here with us, but that wasn't quite true." Lisa wasn't stuck. She'd chosen this. Every shift, every sore foot, every late night was a choice she made to help her family. Her father was getting better slowly, able to work part-time now. Her mother had started smiling again. That was worth more than any performance on any stage. Still, late at night in her apartment, Lisa would sit at her broken keyboard and play. She'd found ways to work around the damaged keys, and she'd learned to keep time in her head when the pedal didn't work. She taught herself new pieces from videos she found online, from library books with yellowed pages. No teacher, no fancy piano, just her and the music that refused to leave her alone. She kept notebooks too, hidden in her locker at work. They were filled with her own observations about the pieces she studied, little notes about timing and feeling and how to make a phrase sound just right. Sometimes she'd write about the performances she wished she could attend, the competitions she saw advertised online. She'd imagine herself there just once, playing for people who understood what music could do. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Lisa pulled it out and saw a text from her coworker, Jennifer. They'd become friends over the past year, sharing shifts and complaints about difficult customers. But this message was different. Hey, the Grandview Hotel needs extra servers tomorrow night. Some huge charity event. They're paying triple our normal rate. Want in? Lisa stared at the message. Tomorrow was Sunday, her only day off this week. She'd planned to spend it practicing. Maybe finally learning that piece by Debussy she'd been avoiding because it was so technically challenging. Triple pay meant she could fix her keyboard's pedal, and maybe even get the sticky keys repaired. That would take months off her savings plan. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Part of her wanted to say no, to keep that one day for herself and the music. But the practical part of her, the part that had learned to put dreams aside for reality, knew what she had to do. She typed back quickly before she could change her mind. Count me in. She sent the message and put her phone away. Table 12 needed their check. Table 4 wanted dessert menus. The night stretched ahead of her, full of work that had nothing to do with the music still playing in her head. But tomorrow night at the Grandview Hotel, she'd make enough money to bring her little keyboard back to life. It wasn't Carnegie Hall, but it was something. And sometimes something was enough. Lisa had served wealthy people before, but nothing prepared her for the Grandview Hotel. The moment she walked through the staff entrance, she knew this was a different world entirely. The hallways leading to the ballroom had marble floors so polished she could see her reflection. The walls were covered in silk fabric that probably cost more per yard than she made in a week. When she finally entered the grand ballroom, she had to stop and stare. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls made of crystal, each one bigger than her entire apartment. The tables were draped in cream-colored linens, set with china so delicate it looked like it might break if you breathed on it too hard. Fresh flowers covered every surface, their perfume mixing with expensive cologne and perfume. The other servers were already in position, all wearing the same crisp white uniforms. Lisa smoothed down her jacket and checked her shoes. She'd polished them this morning, but next to all this luxury, the scuff marks on the toes seemed more obvious than ever. A woman walked past in a gown that shimmered like liquid gold, and Lisa wondered if the dress cost more than her entire year's salary. Probably. The event coordinator, a thin woman with a headset and a clipboard, gathered the servers for a quick briefing. This was a fundraiser for youth music education, she explained. The host was some tech billionaire named Richard Morrison and his wife, Diane. There would be speeches, a silent auction, and a special musical performance by a famous pianist flown in from Europe. Lisa felt a bitter twist in her stomach. A fundraiser for music education. Rich people in expensive clothes drinking champagne to help kids learn music. It should have made her happy. This was a good cause. Exactly the kind of program she wished had existed when her dreams fell apart. But standing here in her server's uniform, invisible to the guests who would never look her in the eye, it was hard not to feel the irony. She pushed the feeling down. She was here to work, not to feel sorry for herself. The pay was too good to waste on bitter thoughts. The evening began, and Lisa fell into the rhythm of the work. Carry trays of champagne, offer appetizers, clear empty glasses, smile politely, stay invisible. It was the same job she did at Antonio's, just with fancier food and richer customers. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, present but unseen. Then she saw it. At the far end of the ballroom, on a raised platform with velvet curtains behind it, sat a piano. But this wasn't just any piano. This was the kind of instrument she'd only seen in magazines and concert halls. A Steinway grand piano, its black surface so perfectly polished it reflected the chandelier light like a mirror. Even from across the room, Lisa could tell this was something special. She found herself drifting toward it during a quiet moment, her tray of empty glasses forgotten. Up close, the piano was even more beautiful. She'd read about instruments like this, handcrafted, perfectly balanced, each key calibrated to respond to the slightest touch. The kind of piano where you could play the softest whisper or the loudest crash, and every note would sing exactly as you intended. Her fingers tingled. She wanted so badly to touch it just once, to feel what it was like to play something that perfect. Beautiful, isn't it? Lisa jumped, nearly dropping her tray. An elderly woman stood beside her, elegant in a silver gown that probably cost more than Lisa's car. Her white hair was styled perfectly, and her jewelry caught the light with every small movement. But her eyes were kind, not judgmental. "I'm so sorry," Lisa stammered. "I should get back to work. I wasn't trying to—" "You play." It wasn't a question. The woman said it with certainty. as if she could see right through Lisa's server uniform to something deeper underneath. Lisa hesitated. What was she supposed to say? Yes, I play on a broken keyboard in my apartment. Yes, I used to have dreams before life got in the way. She settled for a simpler truth. I used to. The woman smiled. I'm Helen Morrison. I used to play too. Professionally, a very long time ago. She gestured to the piano. This is a 1920s Steinway. Fully restored. I convinced my son to buy it for events like this. Music should be heard, don't you think? Instruments like this shouldn't sit in museums. Lisa could only nod. Helen Morrison. Richard Morrison's mother. She was talking to the host's mother, and she was pretty sure she was supposed to be working right now. Before Lisa could excuse herself, a commotion erupted near the stage. The crowd's murmur changed, voices rising in concern. Lisa saw several people gathering around a man in formal concert attire. He was sitting in a chair, his face pale and sweating. Someone called for a doctor. The event coordinator rushed past, talking urgently into her headset. Fragments of conversation drifted through the crowd. The pianist was sick. Food poisoning, maybe from the hotel restaurant earlier. He couldn't perform. The evening's main event was canceled. Lisa watched as Richard Morrison stepped onto the stage, holding up his hands to quiet the worried crowd. He looked uncomfortable, the kind of discomfort that came from a carefully planned event falling apart. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, tonight's musical performance will need to be postponed. Excuse me. Helen Morrison's voice cut through the anxious chatter. She was moving toward the stage, and her hand was on Lisa's arm, gently but firmly pulling her along. Lisa's heart began to pound. Mrs. Morrison, please, I can't. Richard, darling, Helen called out, her voice carrying across the ballroom. Hundreds of faces turned toward them. Lisa wanted to disappear into the floor. We have our pianist. The words hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Richard Morrison looked at his mother, then at Lisa in her server uniform, her tray still in her hand. His expression was polite but confused. Mother, I don't think she plays, Helen said firmly. And unless I'm very much mistaken, she plays beautifully. Lisa's face burned. Every eye in the room was on her now. The other servers had stopped moving. Guests whispered to each other. This was insane. She was a waitress. She hadn't performed for people in 10 years. She practiced on a broken keyboard in an apartment where the neighbors complained if she played too loud. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her tray. Jennifer appeared and took the tray from her, mouthing, "What's happening?" Lisa couldn't answer. She didn't know. Richard Morrison looked skeptical, and who could blame him? But he stepped down from the stage and approached Lisa directly. His tie probably cost more than her rent. His watch definitely did, but his eyes were kind even if they held doubt. Can you play? He asked simply. This was her chance to say no, to apologize for the confusion and return to being invisible, safe in her server uniform. Nobody would blame her. Nobody expected a waitress to save a charity gala. But something in her chest burned at the doubt in his eyes. At the assumption that someone like her couldn't possibly have the skill, the training, the talent. Poverty didn't erase ability. Circumstance didn't delete years of practice and passion. Just because she worked for minimum wage didn't mean the music had left her. Yes, Lisa heard herself say. Her voice was steady even though her hands weren't. I can play. What would you like to play? His tone was careful, still doubtful. Diane Morrison leaned close and whispered something to her husband. He nodded and turned back to Lisa. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, number 2. Lisa's breath caught. Of course. One of the most famous pieces in classical piano literature. Beautiful, emotional, and technically demanding. A piece that would expose any weakness, any hesitation. They were testing her. Good. All right, she said quietly. The walk to the piano felt like it took forever and no time at all. Her legs moved automatically while her brain screamed questions. What was she doing? This was crazy. She was going to embarrass herself in front of hundreds of wealthy people. She was going to prove them right, that she didn't belong here. But then she sat down on the bench and everything changed. The piano was real. The keys were real. And the music had never left her. It had been waiting all these years for exactly this moment. Lisa placed her fingers on the keys. The ivory felt cool and smooth, so different from the plastic she was used to. She closed her eyes and let herself remember everything. Her father's hospital room, her mother's tears, the empty space where their piano used to be. Every dinner shift, every aching foot, every night she fell asleep exhausted with music still playing in her dreams. Then she began to play, and the world fell away. The first note came out like a whisper, so soft that people in the back of the ballroom leaned forward to hear it. Lisa's fingers touched the keys with a gentleness that surprised even her. The Steinway responded like it was alive, turning that small touch into sound that floated through the air like something you could almost see. The conversation stopped immediately. Someone had been laughing at a nearby table, but the sound cut off mid-breath. Champagne glasses that had been moving toward lips froze in mid-air. Even the servers stopped walking. Everyone turned toward the stage where a waitress in a white uniform was creating something none of them had expected. Lisa didn't notice. Her eyes were closed now, and she was somewhere else entirely. The ballroom disappeared. The crowd disappeared. There was only the music and her hands and the feeling that had been locked inside her chest for 10 years finally breaking free. She played the nocturne the way it was meant to be played. Not as a show of technical skill, but as a story. Each note carried weight. The melody sang and sighed and whispered secrets. Her left hand provided a steady foundation, while her right hand danced above it. The two conversations between bass and treble creating something greater than either could alone. But this wasn't just Chopin's story anymore. It was hers too. When she played the soft sections, they held the memory of practicing late at night in her apartment, keeping the volume low so the neighbors wouldn't complain. When she played the louder passages, they carried the frustration of every dream deferred, every sacrifice made. The way she let certain notes linger spoke of longing. The way she pushed forward through difficult passages spoke of determination. In the audience, Diane Morrison felt tears sliding down her cheeks, ruining her carefully applied makeup. She didn't care. She couldn't remember the last time music had made her feel this way. Beside her, Richard stood completely still, his earlier doubt replaced by something like awe. Helen Morrison stood near the stage with her hand over her heart. She'd been right about this girl. She'd heard thousands of performances in her lifetime, played in hundreds herself, and she knew real talent when she saw it. This wasn't just practice and precision. This was someone who understood that music wasn't about playing the right notes at the right time. It was about meaning something. At a table in the middle of the room, a music journalist named Patricia Chen had her phone out, recording. She'd come tonight as a favor to a friend, expecting a boring charity event with mediocre entertainment. Instead, she was witnessing something remarkable. She made a mental note of the name when she'd heard it announced. Lisa, a waitress, trained herself. This was the kind of story that could go viral. Jennifer stood frozen near the kitchen door, still holding Lisa's serving tray. Her mouth hung open slightly. She'd worked alongside Lisa for a year and had no idea. Sure, Lisa had mentioned she used to play piano, but lots of people used to do things. Jennifer used to do gymnastics as a kid. It didn't mean she could do a backflip right now, but this was something else entirely. Lisa moved into the middle section of the nocturne where the melody becomes more complex, more emotional. Her fingers flew across the keys with a speed that seemed impossible, yet every note was clear and distinct. The piano sang under her hands. She added small touches of her own interpretation, slight changes in tempo that made the piece feel fresh even to people who'd heard it 100 times before. This was what she'd been missing. Not just the piano, but this. The feeling of music moving through her. Of being the bridge between the composer who'd been dead for 200 years and the people listening right now. She'd forgotten how powerful it felt to share music with others, to create something beautiful that existed only in this moment and would never be exactly the same again. The technical demands of the piece didn't seem to touch her. Her hands knew what to do. They remembered the thousands of hours of practice, even if those hours were years in the past. Muscle memory was a strange thing. You could lose everything else, but somehow your hands remembered. They remembered the stretches, the difficult jumps between notes, the precise timing needed to make trills sound smooth instead of choppy. As Lisa approached the final section, she played even more softly than before. The nocturne ends quietly, fading away like a beautiful dream you don't want to leave. She let each note ring out fully before moving to the next, giving the melody room to breathe. The final chord hung in the air, sustained by the piano's perfect resonance and by Lisa holding down the pedal with her foot. Then silence. Lisa opened her eyes slowly, almost afraid of what she'd find. For a moment, nothing happened. The ballroom was completely quiet. Had she done something wrong? Had they hated it? Her heart began to sink. Then the applause started, and it wasn't the polite golf clap she'd expected at an event like this. It was real. It was loud. People were standing up from their tables, some of them shouting. Someone yelled, "Bravo!" in a voice choked with emotion. The sound built and built until it felt like the chandeliers might shake. Lisa stood up from the piano bench on legs that felt like water. Her hands were trembling now, not from fear but from the rush of adrenaline and emotion flooding through her. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. After 10 years of broken dreams and double shifts and practicing on a keyboard held together with hope, she'd played for people again. And they'd listened. Really listened. Richard Morrison was the first person on stage. His face had completely transformed. The skeptical, doubtful expression was gone, replaced by genuine amazement. He took Lisa's hand and shook it firmly. "What's your name?" he asked, even though he'd heard it earlier. It was like he needed to ask again to make it real. "Lisa Chen," she said. Her voice came out shaky. "Where did you train?" "Juilliard." "Curtis." "Berkeley?" Lisa felt her face flush. Here it was, the moment where she had to admit the truth. "I didn't. I mean, I had piano lessons when I was younger, but I never went to music school. I've been teaching myself for the past 10 years. I haven't played on a real piano in a very long time." The words created a ripple effect through the people close enough to hear. Someone gasped. Patricia Chen's eyes went wide as she kept recording. This story just got even better. Richard looked stunned. "You taught yourself? All of that self-taught?" "I had good teachers when I was young," Lisa said quickly, not wanting to take credit she didn't deserve. "They gave me a strong foundation. After that, it was just practice, a lot of practice. And library books. And YouTube videos." She felt ridiculous saying it out loud. YouTube videos. Like that was equivalent to a conservatory education. But Helen Morrison stepped onto the stage and she was smiling. "My dear, that was extraordinary. Truly extraordinary. Technical skill can be taught, but what you have, that feeling, that understanding of the music, that can't be taught. Either you have it or you don't. And you have it." Diane Morrison joined them on stage, not bothering to wipe away her tears. "Would you play something else, please? I don't think anyone here is ready for you to stop." Lisa looked out at the audience. Hundreds of faces looking back at her. People who'd paid thousands of dollars to be here tonight, who'd expected a famous European pianist and got a waitress instead. And they were smiling. They were waiting. They wanted more. She looked down at her uniform, at her practical shoes with the scuff marks. Then she looked at the Steinway, still sitting there waiting, its keys ready to sing again if she'd just touched them. "Okay," Lisa said softly. "I'll play something else." The applause started again before she even sat back down. Lisa returned to the bench, adjusted her posture, and took a deep breath. She thought about what to play next. Something bold, she decided. Something that would prove the first piece wasn't a fluke. She placed her fingers on the keys and launched into Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, one of the most passionate and technically demanding pieces in the piano repertoire. If they wanted more, she'd give them more. Tonight, for the first time in 10 years, Lisa wasn't just a waitress who used to play piano. She was a pianist who happened to wait tables, and the difference between those two things turned out to be everything. Lisa played 4 more pieces that night, each one different from the last, each one showing a different side of what she could do. After the Rachmaninoff, she played a delicate piece by Debussy that sounded like water flowing over stones. Then came a fiery section from a Beethoven sonata that made people sit up straighter in their chairs. She finished with a jazz arrangement she'd taught herself from an old recording, her fingers dancing across the keys in ways that made the classical music crowd lean forward in surprise. By the time she played the final note of the evening, it was almost midnight. Her hands ached in the best way possible, the kind of tiredness that comes from doing something you love until you can't do it anymore. The applause had continued after each piece, but now it felt different, warmer, more personal. People weren't just clapping for a good performance anymore. They were clapping for her story, for what she represented. Patricia Chen had been recording the whole time, posting clips to her social media accounts between pieces. Her phone kept buzzing with notifications. The videos were being shared rapidly, comments pouring in. Who is this woman? I've never heard of her. This is incredible. By the time Lisa stood up from the piano for the last time, hashtags were already forming. Someone had started calling her the Waitress pianist and the name was spreading. But Lisa didn't know any of that yet. She was still on stage, overwhelmed and exhausted, when Richard Morrison approached her again. This time, his wife was with him, along with Helen and several other people Lisa didn't recognize. They all looked at her with expressions she couldn't quite read. Respect, maybe. Interest, definitely. Lisa, Richard said, and his voice was different now, more serious. I'd like to talk to you about something important. Do you have a few minutes? She almost laughed. Did she have a few minutes? She was supposed to be clearing tables right now, cleaning up after the event. Instead, she'd just performed for some of the wealthiest people in the city. Yes, she managed to say. Of course. They moved to a quieter corner of the ballroom away from the crowds that were starting to leave. Jennifer caught Lisa's eye as she passed and gave her a huge thumbs up, mouthing words Lisa couldn't quite make out. Something like, oh my God, probably. Richard didn't waste time with small talk. The Morrison Foundation exists to support young musicians who have talent, but lack opportunity. We provide scholarships, fund music programs in schools, and help promising artists get the training they need. That's what tonight was supposed to be about, raising money for those programs. Lisa nodded. She knew all this from the event coordinator's briefing. What you did tonight, Richard continued, you became the perfect example of exactly what we're trying to address. Raw talent, undiscovered and unfunded. You should have been performing in concert halls years ago. You should have had access to teachers, instruments, opportunities. Instead, you've been working double shifts at a restaurant and teaching yourself from library books. Diane touched her husband's arm gently, then looked at Lisa. What Richard is trying to say, though he's taking the long way around it, is that we'd like to offer you something. A full scholarship to complete your musical education. Any music school you want. Juilliard, Curtis, the New England Conservatory, anywhere. The foundation will cover everything. Tuition, living expenses, and a stipend so you don't have to work while you study. The words didn't make sense at first. Lisa heard them, but they felt like they were in a different language. A scholarship, full tuition, any school she wanted. These were the kinds of things she used to dream about when she was 17, before real life had taught her that dreams were luxuries not everyone could afford. I don't understand, she said slowly. Why me? There are thousands of talented musicians out there. People who've been training their whole lives, who have videos and recordings, and because you're real, Helen interrupted gently. You're exactly the kind of person these programs should help. And frankly, after what we heard tonight, it would be a crime for you not to receive proper training. You have something special, dear. Something that can't be taught. But with the right guidance, with access to the right resources, you could have a real career in music. A career in music. The words felt foreign in Lisa's mouth, like trying on clothes that belonged to someone else. She'd given up on that idea so long ago that hearing it now felt dangerous. What if she let herself hope and it fell apart again? What if this was just rich people feeling charitable after a few glasses of champagne? But Richard was pulling out his phone, opening up his email. I'm serious about this. We can have the paperwork started this week. We have connections at every major music school in the country. I can make some calls tomorrow if you'd like. There's something else, Diane added. The foundation holds a spring concert every year at Carnegie Hall. It's one of our biggest fundraisers. We'd like you to perform. It would be in about 6 months, which would give you time to prepare with proper instruction. Carnegie Hall. The two words hit Lisa like a physical force. Every pianist knew that name. It was the kind of place where legends performed, where careers were made. She'd never even been to New York City, let alone imagined playing at Carnegie Hall. This is too much, Lisa said, her voice breaking slightly. I don't know what to say. I need to think. I have responsibilities. My parents, my job, of course, Helen said kindly. This is overwhelming. But let me ask you something. When was the last time you let yourself come first? When was the last time you chose your dreams instead of everyone else's needs? The question stung because Lisa couldn't remember. After her father's accident, she'd become the responsible one, the one who made sacrifices so everyone else could be okay. And that was fine. She'd made peace with it. But standing here now, being offered everything she'd once wanted, she realized she'd never actually stopped wanting it. She'd just gotten very good at pretending. My father, she started, then stopped. He got hurt. We had medical bills. That's why I couldn't go to music school before. I needed to work to help. And he's better now mostly, but I can't just leave them. Richard nodded. The stipend is generous. You could help your family and study, and you'd only be gone during the school term. But Lisa, I have to ask, what would your father want? If he knew about this opportunity, what would he tell you to do? Lisa knew the answer immediately. Her father would tell her to take it. He'd probably cry while saying it, apologizing for being the reason she'd given up her dreams in the first place, even though the accident wasn't his fault. He'd been carrying that guilt for years. She could see it in his eyes every time she came home exhausted from a double shift. He'd tell me to go, she whispered. Then maybe you should listen to him, Diane said softly. Patricia, Chen approached their small group looking apologetic for interrupting. I'm sorry, but I thought you should know. The videos from tonight are going viral. You're trending on social media. Multiple news outlets have already reached out to me asking about you. She held up her phone, showing Lisa a screen full of notifications, shares, comments from thousands of people. Lisa stared at the screen, videos of her playing, comments from people all over the country, all over the world. This is beautiful. Who is she? We need more stories like this. Proof that talent exists everywhere if we just look for it. Someone had already created a fan page. The hashtag Waitress Pianist was spreading like wildfire. Your life is about to change, Patricia said simply. You should be prepared for that. But Lisa wasn't sure how to prepare for something like this. 24 hours ago, she'd been worried about fixing her keyboard's broken pedal. Now people were talking about Carnegie Hall and music schools and viral videos. It felt like she'd stepped through a doorway into a completely different world. Richard pulled out a business card and pressed it into her hand. Think about it tonight. Call me tomorrow. But Lisa, please understand, this isn't charity. This is investment. We invest in talent. And you have more talent in your little finger than most people who've been playing their whole lives. You deserve this opportunity. Helen hugged her, which surprised Lisa so much she almost forgot to hug back. I'd like to offer my services as well, the older woman said. I'm mostly retired, but I still coach a few students privately. I'd be honored to work with you if you'd like. No charge, of course. Just an old pianist who'd love to see what you could become with proper guidance. The evening wound down slowly. Guests came up to Lisa one by one, shaking her hand, asking questions, offering congratulations. She answered automatically, still in shock from everything that had happened. Jennifer helped her gather her things from the staff room, talking a mile a minute about how incredible it all was. As Lisa walked out of the Grand View Hotel into the cool night air, she pulled out her phone. She needed to call her father. She needed to tell him about the scholarship, about Carnegie Hall, about everything. Her finger hovered over his contact and she realized her hand was shaking, not from fear this time. From possibility, from hope, from the terrifying, wonderful feeling that maybe, just maybe, dreams didn't have an expiration date after all. Lisa sat in her car in the hotel parking lot for 20 minutes before she could bring herself to make the call. Her phone felt heavy in her hand. Through the windshield, she could see people leaving the gala, climbing into expensive cars and hired drivers. She was still wearing her server uniform. In a few hours, she was supposed to be back at Antonio's for the Monday lunch shift. Finally, she pressed her father's contact. He answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep. Lisa? What's wrong? Are you okay? She realized it was past midnight. Of course he'd be worried. I'm fine, Dad, better than fine. I need to tell you something. She told him everything. About the piano, about being asked to perform, about the videos going viral, about the scholarship offer in Carnegie Hall. Her words tumbled out in a rush, tripping over each other. When she finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. Dad? She heard a sound that made her heart clench. Her father was crying. Not sad crying, but the kind of crying that happens when something you've carried for too long finally lifts. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry, baby. You gave up everything because of me. Because of my accident. You should have been doing this 10 years ago. You should have... Stop, Lisa said firmly. Dad, stop. None of this was your fault. The accident wasn't your fault. And I don't regret helping. I don't regret any of it. It's just that now maybe I get a second chance. How many people get that? Her father took a shaky breath. You have to take it. Whatever they're offering, you take it. Your mother and I will be fine. I'm working again. We're stable. You've done enough for us. More than enough. It's time for you to do something for yourself. Are you sure? Lisa, I have never been more sure of anything in my life. You were born to make music. I knew it when you were 5 years old and you climbed onto that piano bench for the first time. You take this chance and you don't look back. They talked for another 30 minutes. Her mother got on the phone crying too, saying the same things her father had said. Take the opportunity. Don't worry about them. Make them proud. By the time Lisa hung up, she was crying as well, but she felt lighter than she had in years. The next morning, Lisa called Richard Morrison. By the afternoon, she was sitting in the foundation's office signing paperwork. By the end of the week, she'd given her notice at Antonio's. Tony hugged her so hard she could barely breathe. I knew there was something special about you, he said, wiping his eyes with his apron. Even with that weird air piano thing you do. Go show them what you've got. The videos from the gala had exploded online. Major news outlets picked up the story. Local TV stations wanted interviews. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Patricia Chen wrote an article that was shared hundreds of thousands of times. The headline read, Waitress teaches herself piano, stuns billionaires at charity gala. People loved it. It was the kind of story that gave people hope, that reminded them talent could come from anywhere. But Lisa tried not to pay too much attention to the attention. She had work to do, real work. Helen Morrison started coaching her 3 times a week. The older woman was kind but demanding, pushing Lisa to refine her technique, to understand the theory behind what her hands already knew instinctively. You have natural talent, Helen said during their second session. But talent alone isn't enough for a career. You need discipline. You need to understand not just how to play, but why you play each note the way you do. Lisa had never worked harder in her life. The practice sessions were longer and more intense than any double shift she'd ever pulled. Her hands cramped. Her back ached from sitting at the piano for hours, but it was different from the pain of waitressing. This pain had purpose. This exhaustion felt earned in a way that mattered to her soul. She applied to 3 music schools and was accepted to all of them. She chose the New England Conservatory, partly because of its reputation, partly because Helen had connections there. The scholarship covered everything, just as promised. For the first time in a decade, Lisa didn't have to check her bank account before buying groceries. The months leading up to the Carnegie Hall performance flew by in a blur of practice and lessons and preparation. Lisa learned more in those 6 months than she had in the previous 10 years of teaching herself. She had access to practice rooms with beautiful pianos, to libraries full of sheet music, to professors who could answer questions she'd been puzzling over for years. But the most important thing Helen taught her wasn't technical. It was something deeper. Music isn't about showing off, Helen said one afternoon. It's not about proving you can play the hardest pieces or hit the most notes. It's about communication. It's about taking something you feel and making other people feel it too. That's what you did at the gala. You weren't just playing notes. You were telling your story. Never forget that. Finally, the night of the Carnegie Hall performance arrived. Lisa stood backstage in a deep blue gown that the foundation had helped her choose. Her hair was styled professionally for the first time in her life. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. But when she looked down at her hands, they were the same hands that had carried trays and cleared tables and practiced on a broken keyboard in a tiny apartment. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the sacrifice and the struggle, the moments when she'd almost given up, the night at the Grandview Hotel that had changed everything. She thought about her parents sitting in the audience right now, probably crying already. She thought about Tony and Jennifer, who'd driven up from home to watch. She thought about every person who'd ever had to choose between dreams and survival. The stage manager gave her the signal. It was time. Lisa walked onto the stage of Carnegie Hall and the spotlight found her. The audience was huge, over 2,000 people filling the historic venue. But she wasn't nervous anymore. She'd learned something important over the past 6 months. The size of the audience didn't matter. The fanciness of the venue didn't matter. What mattered was the connection between the music and the people listening. She sat at the piano, a beautiful Steinway like the one at the gala, and adjusted her position. She looked out at the crowd one more time, finding her parents' faces in the third row. Her father was already crying. Her mother held his hand. Lisa placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. She'd chosen Chopin's Nocturne, the same piece she'd played that first night. It felt right to begin where it all started. But this time she played it differently, not with the desperation of someone proving themselves, but with the confidence of someone who'd finally found their way home. The music filled Carnegie Hall, reaching the highest balcony, touching every person in every seat. And Lisa understood now that this moment, as wonderful as it was, wasn't the ending of her story. It was just the beginning. There would be more performances, more challenges, more opportunities to grow. She'd eventually graduate from the conservatory. She'd become not just a pianist, but a teacher too, working with the Morrison Foundation to find other kids like her. Other talented people who just needed someone to believe in them. But all of that was in the future. Right now, in this moment, Lisa just played. She poured everything into the music. Every late-night shift, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt and every surge of hope. The piece built to its emotional peak, then faded softly, gently, like a beautiful dream you want to hold on to just a little longer. The final note hung in the air of Carnegie Hall. Lisa held the pedal down, letting it ring out until it disappeared into silence. Then the applause came, washing over her like a wave. People stood. They cheered. They celebrated not just a performance, but a story of resilience and second chances. Lisa stood and bowed, and as she did, she caught sight of her reflection in the piano's polished surface. She saw a woman who'd worked hard and never stopped believing that music mattered. She saw someone who'd learned that dreams don't have expiration dates, that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. She saw herself, finally exactly where she belonged. The applause continued, but Lisa was already thinking about tomorrow, about the next piece she wanted to learn, about the students she wanted to help, about all the music still waiting inside her, ready to be shared with the world. Tonight was magical, yes, but tomorrow held promise too. And for the first time in 10 years, Lisa couldn't wait to see what came next. The girl who'd once served champagne to millionaires had become someone who served something far more valuable. The reminder that talent and determination can overcome any obstacle, and that sometimes all you need is one chance to show the world what you're capable of. Lisa took one final bow, her smile bright enough to rival the stage lights. Then she walked off stage, not as a waitress who used to play piano, but as a pianist who was just getting started.